From poop soups to drugged out infants, you won't believe the craziness that used to be considered medicine. And here's a list of the weirdest medical practices in history, with A tier being the worst. Female hysteria cures. Not to sound controversial, but we can all agree that women can sometimes be a little off their rocker, right? For centuries, it was generally accepted that women were always losing their heads, and something had to be done about it. Back then, they just believed women went wild after they lost control of their appetite. Of course, they were men, and those were the times when the fire of patriarchy still burned hot and red. So whenever a woman showed any symptoms, from an itchy butt to wanting to ride a horse bareback, she was either called a witch or sent to the doctor's office for a unique kind of therapy. To treat female hysteria, the doctor simply closed the door, gloved up his hands, and bent over or under the sick woman. Then he went to work beneath her skirt. His job was essentially to do the impossible. He was expected to give the woman a vigorous massage until, wait for it, she came. Hello, Dr. Max. Weren't you here yesterday, Mrs. Smith? Yeah, I was, but I'm still a little fuzzy-headed from the condition. Does your husband know you're here? Actually, he sent me here because I wouldn't let him touch my honey pot. But that's because he can't do it like you. You know what, ma'am? I might have to send you to the Happy Hotel. Yes, please. Send me to heaven. Now, you can take comfort in the knowledge that the only reason you've ever made a woman orgasm is because you didn't attend medical school. Anyway, those doctors probably spent their last days with the shaky hands they got from being a human vibrator for so long. As for those hysteric women who couldn't be cured by the doctor's magic fingers, they ended up in the loony bin or had their uteruses removed. E tier. The soothing syrup. The late 19th century must have been the wildest period in human history. Children were so hyped back then that someone had to make something to calm them down. But the cure for juvenile disobedience was a fun drug. If you were a 5-year-old who wouldn't mind getting hooked on narcotics. Mind you, this was also the time when people treated coughs with heroin and bought cocaine over the counter. So, if you decided to throw a loud tantrum in the middle of a dollar store in 1896, your mom would casually grab a couple bottles of Mrs. Winslow's soothing syrup or some powder or lozenges that could have a similar effect. That should keep him quiet for a while. Sean, wake up, it's dinner time. Hey, Carl, call the doc. I think Sean's gonna be quiet for a long, long time. The soothing syrup market only lasted till 1910. This was when the New York Times revealed that these poisons contained morphine sulfate, chloroform, morphine hydrochloride, codeine, heroin, powdered opium, and cannabis indica. That's surely the craziest cocktail you've ever heard about, and they used it to calm down children. B tier. Fecal microbiota transplant. If your doctor ever prescribes you a fecal microbiota transplant, he's medically telling you to eat which is just one of the crazy things you can get away with saying when you have a medical degree. Now, for some reason, you might have an issue with eating the gross, smelly stuff you passed out of your butthole. But you shouldn't waste too much time thinking about that, because the gist of this procedure is that the poop you'll be eating won't be yours. Yes, the taco tastes better after going through some random Joe's digestive tract. So, who was the wise guy who thought medicinal poop eating was a good idea? Firstly, you'll need to find Elon Musk's secret time machine and go back over 1,000 years to ancient China. When you arrive in the past, ask for a certain Chinese healer by the name of Jai Hong. And when you contact him, ask him about the healing powers of his famous yellow soup. Knowing him, he'll probably want you to experience it yourself. So he'll mix and mash some poop together and serve it to you in a ceramic bowl. Now slurp away. Attaboy, because you're gonna need some courage as the poop sits on your tongue and you chew some of the fiber in it before the slimy thing travels down your gullet. And make sure you fight the strong urge to vomit. Jai Hong wants the doo-doo in your stomach, not on his polished wood floor. After that info, it's okay if you never want to meet Jai Hong, but imagine the harrowing childhood of Jai Hong Jr., who had to eat the yellow soup once every week until he became a traumatized man. You know, when I was a kid, my dad used to give me lots of sweets to make me happy. Mine made me a bowl of spicy chicken during winter. What about you, Hong? Now sniff it. Yeah, that was a taste of what my father fed me every week. Although Hong didn't have the tools to see what poop did inside the body, modern science has confirmed that his poop-eating idea wasn't bad at all. Now when you have what the meds call a persistent Clostridium difficile, they feed you good shit, and this is FDA approved. So they feed you shit from a healthy colon, and with time, the microbes in that shit replace the haywire ones in your sick colon. And you can thank your poop donor for ending the painful diarrhea and belly aches that come with the condition. The treatment is less fun now though, since people don't have to eat Hong's yellow soup anymore. A tier. Electric erectile dysfunction cures. You know, before electricity became infamous for its use in criminal executions, there was a time when people thought it could wake the dead. In the late 19th century, some quacks convinced impotent men that they could wrestle their power back from the demon that stole it by shocking sleepy Mr. Johnson back to life. So they invented all kinds of brainless gizmos to create this penile awakening. Men bought electric belts and beds and other ridiculous devices and took them home with the hope of seeing some action downtown again. Get your cockshocker here, pay $1.25 and watch your Willie come alive. Hey, Mr. Bigsby, that's doctor to you. Okay, doctor, can I get one of those? I'm guessing all is not well in the southern hemisphere. That's none of your effing business, mister. Doctor! You. So, Mrs. Robinson, I heard you've been having some trouble in the bedroom. I'd like to let you know that I've dedicated my life to serving women like you. Oh, Dr. Bigsby, thank you for your service to all the wives like me in this town. I'm always happy to serve, madam. I heard it works after the 10,000th try. Aren't you happy you can just down one magical blue pill and watch your Dwayne Johnson get harder than The Rock? D tier. Lobotomies. Lobotomy is probably the biggest medical failure in recent history. In the 1940s, if you went to your doctor and told him you were depressed, he'd lay you on a table and poke two glorified ice picks called leucotomes through the edge of your eye sockets. Of course, your scalp was doused with Novocaine to relieve the pain of tearing through it with spikes, but since your brain naturally felt no pain, the doctor freely knocked the spikes in with a hammer to reach deep into the front of your brain. Then he'd wiggle the picks around in there until he was sure he'd peeled off the top layer of your frontal lobe, then he'd send you home feeling. By the time you left that table, your depression would have truly disappeared, but that would be because you could no longer feel anything. In short, you'd have become an emotional vegetable. I just feel shy around women. I don't think this is necessary. Oh, trust me, it totally is. What's the eye? The eye! How are you feeling now, Mr. O'Toole? I feel... What do you feel? I just feel? I'm so happy your operation was successful. This Portuguese neurologist, who looks kinda lobotomized himself, Antonio Egas Moniz, performed the first lobotomy in 1935, and his mates celebrated it like he'd just found a way to smoke tobacco without getting lung cancer. They called it the miracle cure and even gave him a Nobel Prize for it in 1949. However, the docs soon found out that the only miracle this surgery did was turn people into psychological plants. But that enlightenment came after they'd reduced over 70,000 people to emotionless bonsai trees. Thankfully, these days, psychiatrists only use lobotomy as a last resort. A tier. Urine therapy. Next time you go to the bathroom for a number one, you might want to save that golden juice for later. Some guy on the TV said it pairs well with a good steak on a nice summer evening. But even more importantly, it's medicinal. That was why the Greeks, Romans, and Egyptians all enjoyed their golden showers and a funky cup of the good old lemon rain. Back then, when people took the piss, they actually took the piss. Sometimes to whiten their teeth. So next time someone tells you to pee on them, don't see it as a weird request, since it's actually a healthy thing. Some fake doctor even wrote a book on this medicine in 1945 where he called urine the water of life. In it, he basically claimed it could cure whatever comes out of the wet market next. So, Dr. Armstrong, when did you fall in love with piss? You know, I ask myself that question all the time, but I never seem to have an answer for it. But now that I think about it, I think it was that night my mom mistook the piss she was keeping from my dad for apple juice and gave it to me. I was only 2 years old at the time, and my taste buds still remember. But according to experts, unlike which helps your gut health, using piss for medical reasons is really just you pissing in the wind, which means it doesn't work, and it might even kill you if you overdo it. D tier. Bloodletting. From ancient Greece till the 19th century, people believed removing bad blood was the best cure for every known disease. This was based on the idea that your body fluids were divided into 4 humors, and that was probably because this funny concept killed a lot of sick people. These so-called humors were blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. And of course, they corresponded with the 4 Greek elements of air, water, earth, and fire. So if one of those humors was unbalanced, oof, they treated it like a tsunami had invaded your body and driven your system crazy. Usually the culprit behind the imbalance was too much blood. So in older times, they just cut a hole in the infected area to see how much blood you could lose before you plopped and died. But by the 19th century, the Europeans had made it less fun with the invention of bloodletting tools and the use of leeches. So let's say your physician was Team Leeches. He would place as many of those little vampires on your swollen butt and watch them suck their fill until you pass out from hypovolemic shock, which meant your body had lost all its blood and your bloodthirsty organs were now on strike. So, cut to organ failure and you're dead. This procedure was so dumb that they thought fainting from the bloodletting was a sign that it was working. Even George Washington did some letting after he had the throat infection that eventually killed him in 1799. But the craziest thing here was that you didn't even need a surgeon to let your blood. Your barber could do it. Although they called them barber surgeons to hide the ridiculousness of letting the guy who just gave you a fade slit a hole in your vein. As an alternative, you could also bleed yourself to death at home if you were really into DIYs. Count Dracula surely enjoyed this period where he could count on people for his daily dose of fresh pools of blood. C tier. Trepanation. These days, when you accidentally drop an anvil on your head, you simply grab a bottle of Advil, pop some pills, and get on with your life. But from the Stone Age to the 17th century, if people thought you had some crazy idea in your head, the medical geniuses of those days would open your skull to relieve the pressure in your brain and set your head right. Who knows, maybe chewing some herbs would have prevented this crude surgery, but hey, why would you need a second opinion when Dr. Flintstone says the best treatment for a migraine is an open mind? To perform this procedure, the earliest physicians used a sharp knife or a burr, which was this round file, to slowly chip or grind away the skull and reveal the outermost surface of the brain called the dura mater. But in the Renaissance era, the Europeans got creative and came up with a better way to cut open this hole by using what they called a trephine. So at this time, if you were found to be a tad insane in the membrane, you'd be sat in a chair. Then the physician would provide this evil device from a metal box. He'd probably pray onto it to sterilize it, because God was the best sterilizer. Then he'd place the trephine's cylindrical head on your head, and you shouldn't expect any form of anesthesia. You just have to raw dog the excruciating pain like everyone else. Anyway, there would be people there to hold you when the screaming began, and it usually started as the physician applied intense pressure on your skull. The pain would shoot from your head down to your toes as he turned the trephine clockwise and anti-clockwise until it opened a clean, circular hole in your skull. Then you'd be left alone with an open skull and nothing to numb the throbbing ache in your head. But if, for instance, your surgery had the shakes from his alcohol withdrawal while making the hole, you might have to say bye-bye to your old brain, because there would be a gaping hole in the new one. From a modern standpoint, trepanation probably wasn't a brainy idea. Although some of its victims survived, in most cases the trauma from the procedure caused hemorrhaging and infections that led to their deaths. D tier.